A question often asked by video game lovers year over year is where all the good writing about video games can be found, whether by finding dissatisfaction from the inopportunity for sharing profound experiences with games in their personal lives, or from observing that the artistic criticism of other art media has greater depth than games. There comes a time when people want more out of a hobby than the hobby itself, when gaming hobbyists begin seeking community, insight, and respect. This change in how we want to engage with media often occurs in a person's early 20s. A society begins to mantle new adults with the responsibilities of career and debt. Social norms begin to ask people to put away childish things like toys, games, and cartoons. To this pressure, people respond in one of two ways. They accept the norms and abandon them, or reject the norms and bring childish things into adulthood. Some simply continue to enjoy games while viewing them as childish things. Others become the makers, programmers, designers, and artists, creating games for the next generation. Others turn to scholarship, through history or economics, through psychology or religion, through politics or philosophy. Scholarly types take on frameworks to understand games as a medium of art, and to integrate that understanding into the grander human experience of creating meaning out of the world. Which is why, when the people turn to the magazines and websites and see video game reviews formatted as amazing graphics but unstable frame rate, long load times, clunky yet charming controls, the story is not good and there is too much cutscenes, and the music is good like a good food metaphor 8 out of 10, you can see why the marketing-adjacent consumer advocate product review does not quite match the desire of wanting more from a review. Nowadays, there are plenty of good writings on games swimming through the aether. Tens of thousands of blogs, hundreds to thousands of small YouTube channels, thousands of podcasts, and a supersized handful of a few essayists on YouTube, large enough to make a full-time career from writing about games. These act as the genesis of many a young scholar's desire to have deeper conversations on the nature of video game artistry. So the question for me becomes, are people having deep conversations on the nature of games in these communities? Are we connecting and improving on our ideas about what games can achieve? I want to know what kind of conversations people are having out there before they take the leap to platforming their ideas on media content platforms like this one. As a philosopher, believe it or not, I often do not consider the videos that I make to be philosophy. Rather, they are ideas that I get from games that I consider philosophic. My videos are examples of the conversations that I wish I was having with others. Philosophy lives in dialogue, so my question is, does video game philosophy live on Reddit? Circa 2015, Redditor Death's Scythe posts in r/philosophy asking for help with a high school senior's essay with the prompt, "How can video games and philosophy relate?" The poor kid is lost in terms of any idea or angle by which to see video games with a philosophical lens. I want to meet the grade school teacher who would assign that as an essay topic. By our Ask Philosophy standards, this post had fairly few comments, only 16, and each being a relatively short answer, most of which offering topic ideas, some novel, but most being played out by today's standards. The very first response from a deleted user bursts out of the gate with, "Apply Marx's theory of alienation to Minecraft." Now that is a banger. We call that sort of philosophy applied hermeneutics, wherein you take a belief system as a framework, force it upon a piece of media as an analytical framework, and see what comes out, often done without respect to ideas inherent to the source material. Deleted Redditor had nothing to elaborate on this, but surprisingly, Redditor Must Dash comes in with excitement because they have begun writing that exact essay. Must Dash promises to follow up tomorrow to discuss some of the finer details. He never does. So I suppose I will have to do it. Look forward to my future video, The Marxism of Minecraft. The deleted Redditor also went to the old faithful "Are video games art?" question. yet followed up with a more nuanced topic of real-world ethics of simulating real tragedies in game form. Sadly, they did not continue this discussion either. I would actually like to comment on this idea now, given that I think games and simulations share a lot of conceptual space in terms of software. What really sets a simulation apart from a game is that it is made specifically to prepare for real-world events. They are for the sake of training and learning exclusively, sometimes exclusively designed to make a person confront failure. The most recognizable example of this in media being Star Trek's Kobayashi Maru, which I am going to say as Kobayashi Maru because that's how Star Trek culture pronounces it, even though in Japanese it should be Kobayashi Maru. So creating simulations based on real-world failures to learn what could have been done differently in similar situations seems like an ethically good action to take. I think the ethical murkiness comes into play when using the same scenarios for different end goals, for the creation of sadistic pleasure, or to capitalize on trauma for the sake of marketing. When should we wonder about normalizing the use of software specifically designed to get people to engage with real harm, as opposed to purposefully creating distance to imaginary ludic violence? Reddit user Drink40 Tonight seems primarily concerned with ontology, whether or not to treat game worlds as physically real, and whether that makes characters in games moral entities, or questioning whether entertainment can be ethical at all when people could opt to actively improve society rather than opt for escapism. Redditor Hagar Shoes spends some time talking about how freedom is the ultimate goal of what games aim to be, whereas we can absolutely question that premise. Their main curiosity lies with whether games can contribute to debates about free will versus determinism. Even name drops The Stanley Parable, which is probably the most well-known game that explores that topic, though the game also satirizes putting an ontological question like that onto games in the first place. Redditor Jiminy Piminy recounts essayist Jerry Goodenough's paper on film and philosophy to elaborate on how art can be philosophic. Whereas Jerry Goodenough said film cannot be philosophically reflective, Jiminy Piminy rebuts, correctly in my opinion, that the arts can posit ideas and thus contribute to social dialogues about ideas, asserting that games may even be better at this by being more immersive. Deleted Redditor actually comes back in here to say that games cannot be better than film at being philosophic because games have player input. They are therefore worse at passively communicating ideas. Oh, if only they had access to my book, Controller Revolution: Why Video Games Are the Future of Philosophy, where I settle this debate in the preface, before getting to the truly interesting parts. Sadly, Jiminy Piminy followed up with asking if Deleted Redditor had played the Valve-developed video games he mentioned. Here is a quick dialogue lesson for everyone trying to have deep conversations about things. A surefire way to derail any conversation about philosophy is to require further conversation to be contingent on consuming media or reading a whole book. That line of rhetoric only ends in, well, you would know I am right if you did, or, well, you must have misunderstood it. Either one of those responses is a pain in the ass, so it is no wonder Deleted Redditor did not bother with a reply. Redditor Snierb entered with a fun fact that someone in Second Life made a Plato's Allegory of the Cave game room, which is neat, I guess. Second Life was still a trash game compared to Gaia Online. What I mainly noticed about this Reddit thread is, firstly, that most of these users were doing philosophy about video games' role in society, so it is a bit more meta, or you could say external, to discussing how video games have and will explore philosophy in unique ways. Secondly, I noticed that there was pretty much no real back and forth here. People were not really having conversations so much as they dropped their response and bailed. Perhaps I have overestimated the quality of conversation happening on Reddit. Perhaps I was simply looking in the wrong place. Perhaps I will try again on another day. Stay true.